Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? It is week 13. This is part 1.5, I guess, of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Part 1 was the Thanksgiving Day special episode. We did the 3 Thanksgiving games. And here today we're going to do the rest of the NFC home games, including the Monday Night Football game between the Vikings and the Seahawks, which should be an awesome game. But starting off here tonight, we're going to check out the Packers and the Giants first. Packers minus 6.5, on the road, 45.5 point over under. And right now the Giants, the home team over under is set at 19.5, which I'm very much interested in that. We'll get to that in a little bit, but starting with the Packers here, last week was pretty gross. Aaron Rodgers with his worst game since week 8 of 2015. He was sacked 5 times last week. They were only 1 for 15 on third down. In the Packers' first 8 possessions, it was a Rodgers fumble, then 3 punts. Then they had a turnover on downs, followed by another 3 punts. So I thought the Packers hit rock bottom in week 9 against the Chargers, but this was even worse. Devontae Adams only caught 7 of his 12 targets. He did score the only Packer touchdown, and he also had a 2-point conversion, so that helped him out. Jamal Williams saw the majority of the running back touches, 18 for him, 13 for Aaron Jones, which I guess makes sense since they were trailing. So you'd think the guy that's more involved in the pass game would see more touches in this kind of game. Jamal Williams actually saw the second most targets on the team actually as well. So not a good game all around for everybody involved. This week the Packers should bounce back, though, against a really bad secondary, especially in the Giants. They're allowing the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks and the 2nd most to wide receivers, so Rodgers and Adams should be totally fine. If you go back and look at Week 10 versus Carolina, coming off of their bad loss to the Chargers, Aaron Jones had 93 yards on 13 carries with 3 touchdowns, and Jamal Williams had 13 carries for himself for 63 yards. So the Packers running backs, I think they'll be fine as well. Moving to the Giants. The Giants offense also looked pretty bad last week. Daniel Jones with only 150 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, but he fumbled for the 14th time this year. He's got it's his 10th lost fumble versus the Bears. The Packers have the 4th best turnover differential in football, so Daniel Jones better be very careful with the football in this game against the Packers. Turning the other team over is something they do very well. He also has 8 interceptions this year, so he's got to pick it up. He's got to be more. He's got to be safer with the ball. The Bears held Saquon Barkley to 60 total yards, but the Packers' run D is not that good. They allow the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. So we'll see if he can get back on track with a good matchup after a couple bad games in a row for Saquon. Sterling Shepard should be he returned last week. He stepped right into a 25% target share with Evan Ingram still out. Ingram, I think I saw today, being Wednesday, that he did not practice again. So if he's out, I think Sterling Shepard is a great play. Golden Tate left the game with a concussion. Sorry, I got my notes all crumbled up here. Golden Tate, he left the game with a concussion, and he's still in the concussion protocol. If he does not clear by Sunday, I think Sterling Shepard is got to be one of the best plays in FanDuel, especially even though the Packers are allowed the 9th fewest fantasy points to wide receiver, somebody that's going to see that much work, and he's only $5,900 right now on FanDuel, so that's great value, especially if Evan Ingram doesn't play too. If both of them are out, Sterling Shepard is probably going to be the best value in FanDuel all week. If Evan Ingram does play, he's a must start because the Packers rank 3rd in most fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So if he plays, you play him. If he doesn't, then definitely get Sterling Shepard into your FanDuel lineups for sure. And if you're looking for a wide receiver to play in your flex, or if you're you're one of these guys that's been getting by without Adam Thielen, he may miss again this week, which we'll get to that game. Maybe it's not the worst start in the world. All right, Redskins at the Panthers. Redskins getting 9.5 points. It's a 40.5 point over/under. FanDuel has the Redskins, the away team, over/under right now set at 14, and I think I'm going to take that under. Terry McLaurin saw 40% of the team's target share last week, 12 targets. He only caught 5 of them, though. Kelvin Harmon, the only other player with more than 2 targets on the team. So McLaurin, to me, is someone, if you've kept as like a backup or a bye week replacement, but now that we're towards the end of the season, you don't have any more buys. I think this is a guy that you can cut for one of those running back handcuffs, or if there's a good streaming option at quarterback, tight end, defense throughout the next couple weeks. Yes, he's getting the volume. Yes, he's the best option on the team. But you're probably not going to use him this week or next week. And yes, he has 2 good matchups in week 15 and 16, but they're both division games against the Eagles and the Giants, so I don't expect much from him. I just don't really have any confidence in the quarterback there. In 3 games as a starter now, the Redskins offense has only scored 1 touchdown, and it was a 45-yard catch and run by Darius Geis against the Jets in week 11. They haven't been putting up very many points, and if it wasn't for what did they have, a kick return touchdown last week, if it wasn't for that, then they would have only been putting up those 3 or 4 field goals, which is why I'm going with the under of 14. Got the kid at quarterback going on the road against the Panthers, who haven't been a very good defense this year either, but I'm feeling pretty confident about that one. Looking at the running backs for the Redskins, Darius Geis with a 41% snap count to Peterson's 34. 3 first half possessions that started with Adrian Peterson resulted in 2 punts and a turnover. Neither of them really looked all that great. The Redskins offense, like I said, only produced 4 field goals and the 1 kick return for a touchdown. These running backs do have a good matchup against the Panthers, who rank 3rd in fantasy points allowed to running backs. So maybe one of these guys busts off a long run, more likely Darius Geis, maybe somebody that I throw into a FanDuel parlay. But they got the matchup, and hopefully we start seeing more carries going towards Darius Geis. I was kind of disappointed to see that these 2 guys split their carries right down the middle, 10 each. I was hoping for a little bit more from Darius. Looking at the Panthers here. So McCaffrey should be great in this game. The Redskins allow the 9th most fantasy points to running backs. We've seen what he can do in tough matchups, so he should dominate against one of the worst run defenses in football. DJ Moore, at least 9 targets in 6 straight games, double-digit targets in 4 of the 6 games, 95 yards or more in the last 4 games, and 2 touchdowns last week. He's absolutely on fire. The Redskins are... I think I said after week 8 or maybe week 7 that Curtis Samuel was the wide receiver that I preferred to own in fantasy, and I couldn't have been more wrong. DJ Moore is averaging 9.5 targets a game. The Redskins have faced 4 wide receivers so far this year that saw at least 9 targets. The best game was Deshaun Jackson's game week 1, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then you had Julian Edelman in week 5. He had 110 yards with a touchdown. Week 4, Sterling Shepard had 76 yards. And then in week 12, Marvin Jones had 46 yards. So he's had 2 really good games, one okay game, one not so good game. I think DJ Moore and this offense is in a much better shape than Marvin Jones and his situation was a week ago. So I have all the faith in the world that DJ Moore is going to continue to play really well. I got him. I traded for him in one of my leagues, and I couldn't be happier about the trade. He's been playing great. All right, so next is the Rams at the Cardinals. Got an NFC West division game here. Rams -3. It's a 47.5 point over-under. The Rams are the latest to be dominated by the Ravens. Third game in a row that the Ravens have won by 34 points or more, which is pretty ridiculous to do that in the NFL. The Rams looked nothing like the offense that we saw in last year's Week 11 Monday Night Football game against the Chiefs. They apparently busted out the color rush uniforms with hopes that maybe it would ignite the creativity that they had last year in the Monday night game, but it was not there whatsoever. Back-to-back 3-and-outs to start the game for the Rams. They got destroyed in the time of possession. Ravens had the ball twice as long, literally 20 minutes to 40 minutes. Todd Gurley had 19 total yards on 9 touches, including 3 catches for -3 yards. I don't know how you do that. His worst game in terms of touches and yards since his first game in the league back in 2015. The Cardinals allow the 6th most receptions and the 4th most receiving yards and the 10th most fantasy points to running backs. So if he sees the touches that he saw in Week 12 against Tampa Bay, he should be totally fine. He had his first 20-plus touch game against Tampa Bay in Week 12, so hopefully they can get back to Gurley in this game against the Cardinals. Rams wide receivers Cooper Kupp continues to lead the team in targets, receiving yards, catches, and air yards. Robert Woods was the better wide receiver in the last 2 games, though. Back-to-back games with at least 9 targets and at least 95 yards. Still no touchdown, though. The Cardinals are also a good matchup for wide receivers. They're pretty much a good matchup for everybody. Their defense is absolutely horrible. They're allowing the 10th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They're tied for 5th in touchdowns allowed to wide receivers. So maybe this is the week that Robert Woods finally scores. But the matchup of the week for sure, not just in this game, but of the entire week, is Gerald. It belongs to Gerald Everett, with the Cardinals giving up the most fantasy points and the most touchdowns this season to tight ends. They've given up 12 touchdowns to tight ends. The next highest team has only given up 7, which is insane. Everett with 4 games this year with 8 or more targets. I'm expecting Sean McVay to attack the glaring weakness that is the Cardinals' defense against tight ends. So another tight end that I expect to do pretty good. Another guy that I may consider throwing in one of those anytime parlay tickets. All right, and the last game for this episode here is the Minnesota Vikings at the Seahawks. Vikings getting 3 points, 48.5 over-under. So what the Vegas thinks this is going to be another high-scoring game. Dalvin Cook should have a good game like he always does. The Seahawks defense is middle of the pack in pretty much every category but one, and that is that they allow the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends. Kyle Rudolph with 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, 5 touchdowns in his last 5 games. He saw 8 targets in his first 5 games combined, and since Week 6, he's now seen 27 targets. So he's gotten way more involved. If Adam Thielen were to miss this game with his hamstring injury that he's missed a couple games now for, I would 100% play Kyle Rudolph in FanDuel and seasonal leagues. Hell, I'm definitely going to throw him into my FanDuel Sportsbook anytime touchdown scorer parlay. One that made me $500-something last week. Maybe I'll throw him into another one this week. We'll see what happens. But if Thielen is out, I think Kyle Rudolph is a shoo-in for a good fantasy day. Stephon Diggs has had really good games and really bad games, both with and without Adam Thielen. I don't think it really matters whether he's playing or not. Diggs has had 2 games with under 20 receiving yards, and he's had 3 games with over 140 receiving yards. So he's just an extremely boomer-bust wide receiver. He's probably, at the end of the season, he's probably going to have one of the wider ranges of floor-to-ceiling performances To me, he's just one of those dudes that if you have him, you just keep him in your wide receiver 2 spot, and you hope to see more boom games than bust games, and it's really that simple. There's no sense in sitting there trying to dissect, should I play him, should I not play him? He's got the upside to have these 100-plus yard receiving games, 10-plus catch games, and yes, he has sometimes had those stinkers where you get 1 or 2 catches. So you just got to live with the bad games and hope that the good games are week winners for you. Beer. Oh, yeah. All right, looking at the Seahawks here. So we saw Rashad Penny finally have his best game of the year. I think I drafted him in 3 or 4 different leagues as one of my, middle round running backs that I was hoping would really come on this year, and it just hasn't really happened except for this past week, of course. But if I'm a Chris Carson owner, I'm not going to panic. So Rashad Penny had a 46% snap count. Chris Carson had a 54% snap count. So he still played on more snaps. Chris Carson did start the game. Carson had 12 touches to Penny's 14 touches. So it's not like Penny, blew him out of the water. So I went through and I looked at every one of their drives, and I wanted to see, how the Seahawks really were using these two guys and why Chris Carson had such a down game as far as his rushing yardage goes, and why Rashad Penny had such a big game. So first drive, Chris Carson had 1 carry. Then Russell Wilson threw an interception. He was sacked on 3rd down. They punt. The second drive, Chris Carson had 1 carry, and then they had that trick play where they hand it to the running back. The running back tosses it back to the quarterback. He throws a deep pass for a touchdown to Malik Turner. And now this trick play was with Chris Carson on the field and not Rashad Penny, so keep that in mind. Third drive of the game, again, Chris Carson 1 carry, 2 Russell Wilson incompletions, and another punt. The fourth drive, Rashad Penny had his first big run of the game, so a 26-yard run. The drive resulted in a 24-yard field goal after both Penny and Carson failed to score on a 1st and 2nd and goal carries. One got the ball on 1st down, the other one got the ball on the 2nd down. I think it was 1st and 7 or 1st and goal, but from the 7 or 8 yard line, neither one of them was able to convert. In the 5th drive, it ended with a punt after a 6-yard run by Rashad Penny and then 2 sacks on Russell Wilson. Going through all this, it made me really realize how Russell Wilson did not have a very good game at all in Week 12 against the Eagles, but we'll get to that. So, so that was the 5th drive. Then in the 6th drive, so this is the last drive of the first half. This was kind of the telling drive to me. It was a 2-minute drill, and Chris Carson was the running back that was on the field. Yeah, he only got the 1 touch for 3 yards, and then after 3 straight incompletions, the Seahawks were forced to punt again. So in the first half, Chris Carson didn't do anything to make it, make it seem like he wasn't going to be productive for the rest of the game. It was really Russell Wilson very much struggled in the first half to get things going. So then they come out from halftime, first drive after the half, and 3 of the first 4 plays went to Chris Carson for 23 yards. I think 2 of them were he caught 2 passes and one of them was a carry, combined 23 yards. And then again, after 2 more incompletions by Russell Wilson, they had to punt again. So again, Chris Carson starts to get going, and Russell Wilson kind of digs him into a hole. So the 8th drive, they don't give the running backs the ball at all, and it ends in an interception. So again, Russell Wilson not playing all that great. Then here it is, the 9th drive. So this is when Rashad Penny had his time. So he had 5 carries to Chris Carson's 1 carry. Penny had runs of 8, 1, 3, 21, and 58 yards, and the 58-yarder was the touchdown. They started that drive on their own 12-yard line, and Rashad Penny finished the drive with 91 rushing yards because they had a 10-yard penalty at one point. But 91 rushing yards on one drive on 5 touches, really. So with that being said, I just, it's not like Penny went out there and was churning out 7-8 yards a carry. He had 2 25-yard carries and that one big 58-yard carry. So yes, those are great. but it's not like he went out there and dominated, with every one of his touches. I would be very surprised if the Seahawks, started giving the majority of the work to Rashad Penny after just one game, just one drive, really only those 2-3 carries. Chris Carson has been a top 12 running back throughout this entire season. I think it's going to take a lot more than just that one game. I think it may take 2 or 3 for Chris Carson to really see his playing time and his touches to go down. For me, this won't be any more than a 50-50 split at best. Now that's unless Chris Carson fumbles again, which has been a problem for him. He leads the NFL as far as running backs go in fumbles and lost fumbles. And I think the next few goal line and short yardage runs will be very interesting for the Seahawks to see who gets those carries and, more importantly, who converts those carries. But Pete Carroll's all about competition. It's the college coach in him. He's not going to play favoritism. He's going to give the ball to whoever is producing and whoever's playing the best. So I don't see either one of these running backs going away. I think it's going to just turn into more of a 50-50 split, which is probably what a lot of people were expecting going into the season. We'll see if Rashad Penny can keep it up. So that's the part 1.5 of the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast for Week 13. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you tune in tomorrow when we run through all of the AFC home games. There's a lot of them, so that episode will be a little bit longer. So make sure you check that out. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.